LSD in the Mind of the Universe might be the most important book a psychonaut or spiritually minded person could ever read. Personally, I know it is the most important book I have ever read to date, so I thought I'd share some of its key insights with you. And as we go along, I might relate some of my psychedelic experiences with his. So basically, this book tells the story of a philosopher professor named Christopher Bache. For all of Bache's life, he had a strong desire to understand himself, the universe, why our lives are the way they are, and why there is so much suffering in this world. In 1979, he embarked on what would be a 20-year psychedelic journey. Over these 20 years, he had a total of 73 high-dose LSD sessions in a safe and secure setting, and he recorded all of his trips on paper, and then he wrote a book explaining his conclusions that he came to from his experiences. At the beginning of the book, Bache validates the value of using psychedelics to explore deep philosophical questions by making a clear distinction between the therapeutic value of psychedelics and the philosophical value of psychedelics. Bache believes psychedelics will give birth to a completely new era of philosophy once more and more people realize their value. I mean, it is true that psychedelics have been used in various cultures throughout the world for thousands of years, and every single one of them has come to the conclusion that these substances are in fact sacred and provide us with a sense of connection to the universe. He writes, quote, "In our culture's materialist paradigm that reduces everything to physical matter, these questions are considered beyond the pale of genuine knowledge, and attempts to answer them are seen as purely speculative enterprises. In my sessions, however, I was given the opportunity to explore these questions in exercises of profound experiential instruction, choreographed by a vast intelligence. What philosopher could turn down such an opportunity?" Now, before we go into depth on Bache's realizations, it is important to note that he has accepted reincarnation as a fact of life. So most of his insights are related to this concept. And before you click out of this video because you think reincarnation is dumb, realize that you are precisely a manifestation of the thousands upon thousands of generations that came before you, and their experiences are literally ingrained into your DNA. Bache also thinks it is impossible to ignore how there are numerous people on this earth who actually have specific memories from their past lives, and the information from their memory actually adds up, and it can be confirmed that their memory actually was something that happened to a real person. There are all sorts of stories and documentaries about people with such memories, and I'll have to admit, some of them are fascinating. But, and this is a big but, the key to Bache's insights is not necessarily about remembering your exact specific past lives. He believes that you forget them for a reason. It's more about getting to know and feel the common emotional theme of those who came before you, which, whether you believe in reincarnation or not, can be tapped into with the states of consciousness one can achieve on psychedelics. Personally, I had never considered the possibility of reincarnation existing before I had a death and rebirth experience on a deep mushroom strip. But now I think reincarnation being true is quite plausible. So I'm going to get straight into it with these insights. I've picked the ones that I think are the most profound and that I resonated with the most. So let's get into it. So with regards to reincarnation, Bache believes it is something very intertwined with Darwinian evolution. He believes evolution yields collective learning over time, and that reincarnation yields individual learning over time. In essence, he believes that as a soul lives through the lives of various different people, it learns how to love and create consciously, which over time leads to higher overall levels of love and consciousness within the species as a whole. And just taking a quick look into history, humanity has only gotten better as time has gone on. We used to be absolute barbarians just a few hundred years ago. Most countries didn't even end slavery until less than 200 years ago, and if you take a simple look at how much the world has changed in the past century, you will realize that humanity is evolving very, very fast, like freakishly fast. From this insight, I derived that because humanity is always moving towards higher love and higher consciousness, one should align themselves with the inevitable evolution of the species. As almost all people who use psychedelics do, Bache realized the nature of divine oneness, and I find the way he realized oneness particularly interesting. In Bache's 20th high-dose LSD session, and in his sessions, by the way, he was using about 500 to 600 micrograms per session, and all of what I am about to say was occurring in his mind, of course. But he saw a girl, and no matter how hard he fought it, he was being drawn to unleash his fury on this girl, to rape, to attack, and kill her. He tried to fight this urge with all his strength, but he could not hold back, and as soon as he turned to carry out the act, he realized he was about to turn to rape and kill himself. He wrote, "Through all of history, I have been doing this to myself." This was a profound realization of oneness, that any suffering you cause another person, you are also causing to yourself, just in another life. I had a similar experience in one of my trips in which I realized the exact same thing, so this one really hit home for me. Because everything is one, you should always try your best to help the less fortunate out, because you are actually just helping yourself in just another lifetime. In his 18th session, Bache was given a powerful insight about creation. He quotes, "My nature is consciousness, and my work was creation, all for joy." In his 19th session, Bache had a full-blown ego death and had an experience where he communed with the intelligence that was running reality. He compared the reunion with this intelligence like a reunion with a long-lost lover. He sensed this intelligence had waited billions of years for life to evolve to the point where it could appreciate and understand what had been accomplished in this self-evolving universe. Bache believes the main message of this trip was to remember what our true nature is, creation. My biggest takeaway from this insight is that I notice how the desire to create is ingrained within every single life form. All life in existence possesses a creative force within them capable of creating more life, keeping the cycle going. And if you go into nature and take a look around, you see life beaming everywhere. Everything is assembled beautifully, and we as conscious life forms created this. We assembled the matter in such a way that it looks and acts like this, all because of our desire to create. One of my favorite quotes from the book is, "Matter is a canvas on which we practice and refine the art of creating." In Bache's 14th high-dose LSD session, he received an insight that he should simply follow the ebbs and flows of life, as they would often lead him where he needed to go, and that struggle usually was not necessary. This began to lead him towards adopting a view that the universe is in fact itself an organism of infinitely complex and unfathomable intelligence. This is a conclusion I have come to as well, and it wasn't until after a few psychedelic experiences that I was able to take a look at this planet and absolutely marvel at how interconnected everything is. All the systems and all the life on Earth work together perfectly so that life can flourish. If you, a human, go into the forest and take a shit, that shit will be used as food for other life forms, and none of that would be possible if life hadn't assembled itself in such a perfect way so that nothing goes to waste. And I genuinely believe it'd be a grave error to think that life somehow just assembled itself by accident and there isn't some higher purpose at play here. And Bache notes of this saying, "The depth of our ignorance is shown in our conviction that the universe is assembling itself by accident, and being given glimpses of our future in touching the edges of the Creator's intent, I saw that evolution was indeed no accident, but a creative act of supreme brilliance, and that humanity is being taken across a threshold that will change it forever." Now this realization Bache had is the one that hit home for me the most, and literally brought me to tears as I read it, and it filled me with purpose that I believe will carry me throughout life. Most religions and philosophy that deal with spiritual awakening, especially Buddhism, say that once you become enlightened, you achieve nirvana and have ended your cycle of reincarnation. Essentially, you have liberated yourself out of this physical world. And Bache said this is all wrong, and I highly agree with him. The real purpose of spiritual awakening is to awaken and become a conscious player in humanity's growth and transformation. Reading those words filled me with so much purpose, and my mind immediately went to work at thinking of all the things I could do to contribute to the development of mankind. There are so many options, and I knew this lack of meaning that plagued me in my past would be gone forever. And Bache believes it is inevitable that humanity will collectively have a spiritual awakening which will be known as the Great Awakening of Humanity. And when this happens, the short-sightedness of the human ego will no longer be as prevalent. Humans will have higher overall empathy levels as divine oneness will be realized, and the species overall will just become much less divided and acting as one. The very division that is responsible for much suffering in the world, this us versus them mentality, will not be nearly as prevalent, and because of this, the world will be so much better. But before the Great Awakening happens, Bache says, there needs to be a great death, which is the equivalent of the dark night of the collective soul. Suffering is what drives us to awaken, and unless we experience a great amount of collective suffering, the collective awakening will not happen. Bache writes, humanity's transformation will come through a terrible suffering. This suffering will be driven by a global systems crisis, triggered by a global ecological crisis. Our species will change when our collective pain simply becomes unbearable any longer. Right now, the structure of how the human mind operates is simply inadequate for the demands that will be imposed on us. The human ego is so short-sighted, it is only designed to focus on the near future. And there are problems in this world, climate change, that if we do not act now, there will be serious consequences in the future. And judging by how not enough is getting done, this crisis will happen eventually. Some people think the Great Death is already happening in COVID-19, but personally I think COVID is far too mild to be considered a Great Death. If anything, I think COVID is a test the universe may be giving us in order to prepare us for what is to come. And this notion of peace following a great amount of suffering is not a new idea. It has happened in the past, many times. Think about World War II. It generated such an amount of collective suffering that the entire developed world is adamant that such an atrocity never happen again. And overall since then, we have been in a time of relative great peace. Now this aspect of Bache's psychedelic work, which happened in his later sessions, is not something I can really relate to, as I have never experienced it, but it is something that many other mystics and psychonauts have spoken of. What Bache calls the diamond luminosity is basically a bright, in fact an unimaginably bright light, that is essentially the source of all existence. When you enter this light, it is like merging with God, and in this state you experience a clarity that is unfathomable. Bache described entering the diamond luminosity like being home again, like this thing is where everything is from and is where everything will eventually go back to. It's God, it's home, it's the pinnacle of reality, or so Bache thought. While Bache was in the diamond luminosity, a new deeper level of reality opened up, and a light even more bright and clear than the diamond luminosity, what Bache calls the absolute light, consumed him. And this light was somehow more clear and more pure and more godlike than the diamond luminosity. And after the trip, Bache quickly realized that there will always be deeper levels of reality, because the universe is absolutely infinite. And he came to the conclusion that the purpose of psychedelic work is not to simply explore the deepest levels of reality possible. The purpose is to integrate these levels of reality back onto Earth. And I think this conclusion is very important for people to realize. I think too many people are too focused on just going to the deepest levels of reality possible and simply just exploring and not noticing and appreciating and integrating everything in between. So these are the 7 most profound insights that I believe Bache gives in his book. And most of these insights are by no means exclusive to Bache. These insights are very common among people who venture into these realms and spend a lot of time there. And I know to a very rationally minded person this will sound like nonsense, because this stuff is very abstract and not concrete. You can't really relate much of it back to science. But when I myself and others enter these realms and our egos fade away and we leave physical reality, this is the stuff that we all experience. We experience the sheer intelligence that the universe is. We experience divine oneness. And this is why I so strongly believe in a lot of what Bache has to say, because I had a lot of these experiences myself, and I know so many others have as well. And I'm not saying I am blindly believing him on everything he says. Some of the reincarnation stuff I'm still having a hard time with, but the great thing is I can go have more experiences of my own and come to my own conclusions. So there is a lot more to the story than these 7 insights. There's the story of how Bache had to hide his work for decades because it was a risk to his career, how these trips also healed him personally, and how at the end of the book, he describes that these experiences are meant to and should be shared. So if you are at this point in the video, you are clearly interested in buying this book. So for those who would like to buy it and read the whole thing, I do have an affiliate link in the description so that when you buy the book, I will earn some commission, which I will invest the money back into the channel so I can make more high quality videos. I also run a book club on Patreon, and the book for September was actually this very book, and we will be discussing its contents very soon, so I encourage you to consider joining if you have a few bucks to shell out and would like to participate in a psychedelic spiritual book club. And that is all I have for today, guys. Have a great day, and peace.